Hi, next I'm going to talk about how to apply the general technique of learning to two of my favorite areas, programming and tennis. One may think that in a highly academic area such as programming and a physical area such as tennis, there will be a lot of uncommons. And how can we apply learning to those different areas? Actually, I found that to my discovery, there's some similarities and some difference. First, I'm going to talk about the similarities. I found that having a good habit is very useful for both learning programming and tennis. It's because if you have a good habit, for example, studying programming, sometimes it might be slightly painful, but if you have a habit of learning it a little bit every day, then you won't find it so painful. And same for tennis. One need to do a lot of practice for tennis, and if you have the habit of doing practice, then it just becomes an automatic process. You don't have to will up your willpower to try to go to the tennis court to practice. Secondly, as I just mentioned, practice. Practice are both very important for a academic area such as programming and for physical skills such as tennis. For programming, practice often means writing some code you have learned. And for sport, in tennis, practice just means going to the court and doing a lot of practice. Both is important. If one do not practice, either by doing the problems or going out there physically to practice your skill in the sport, and just by reading a book, then you cannot really learn the knowledge. Practice makes perfect. Thirdly, another commonalities of learning both skills is using multimodal learning. For example, using videos and books. Sometimes the books has very good, because it often gives a very detailed knowledge, and you can jump around different sections very quickly in a book. For the video, for example, when you get stuck in a book, sometimes it can be very hard, and the video can be easier because it's great, give you graphical information and have a person explaining that to you. Same for tennis. There's a lot of good tennis books out there, but I find that often it's easier by watching a video in YouTube to try to learn the techniques. And you can jump back and forth between these two modes, from a book and video, or even to talk to a friend about how to do something, or even by listen to podcasts and audio as well. For programming, you can also useful to apply the Pomodoro techniques which I mentioned earlier, because it helps the problem of procrastination and try to stay focused. And for programming, it is very useful to test yourself, because if you just try to read a book and not test yourself, it's hard to test whether you have the full sense of competency. By testing yourself, one can do problems or quiz, or to write some code, or even do a programming certificate. Then at the end, not just you verify that you have learned something, you also get the certificate, which is useful. There's some difference between those two skills, programming and tennis. First of all, for programming, it's okay to select the interesting chapters, because often a book can be very, very big and you may be drawn by so many different books and they may not be all relevant to your work. So it's perfectly okay to select which part is relevant to you. And secondly, for programming, the transfer is very useful. By transfer, it means learning in one area, often the knowledge can be applicable or transferred into another. This is particularly relevant in programming because often many programming languages have similar skills or similar knowledge. So after you learn one programming language, it's often much easier to learn another second or third one because they share some similarities in the syntax. For sport, there's some specific learning skill for sport. One is for coaching. Sometimes it's hard to learn by yourself, even by looking at YouTube or from reading a book, because you do not know your weakness. And in this case, I feel a coach is quite important. Someone to point out the mistake you cannot see in yourself and to guide you. Secondly is for experimentation. Because for sport, each person may have their different style. So even if you try to look at a book, they may not be applied to your style. For tennis, you may have different style for your forehand, topspin, flat forehand, and your backhand you may have a single hand backhand or double hand backhand. And each of them have a different style for different players and different coach. So it's good to experiment what applies to you. And lastly, unlearning, and it's related to the German word Einstein effect. Often, after you have learned some prior knowledge, it may be ingrained in your brain and make it harder to learn. For example, if you have a bad style of serving, you first need to unlearn it before you learn a better way to serve in tennis. Often it is hard and it's painful, but it's necessary. Thank you for listening. I hope you find some values in my first YouTube video. Thank you so much.